Episode 7, Grandpa. How are you feeling today?
Great.
Good?
Yeah, I feel good.
We got some questions from Sarah, your granddaughter.
Okay.
Question number 1. Your favorite book that's not the Bible?
Well, back in junior high school, I read everything that H.G. Wells wrote
Okay.
and everything that Robert Heinlein wrote. And I guess I would say the book entitled From the Earth to the Moon by H.G. Wells.
What was it about?
It had to do with science fiction, and I was really into that at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was at my period of time of imagination and looking to do different things.
You've liked sci-fi your whole life, huh?
I did, yeah.
I remember we talked about X-Files.
Yeah, yeah.
You really liked those. And
Yeah, I got out of it later, but I read a lot. I like a lot of adventure, and I got more and more into books that are crime books and that type of thing, and adventure books.
Yeah, I really like sci-fi stuff too.
Yeah.
More movies, but I've just always liked sci-fi.
Yeah.
Okay, second question. Sarah wants to know the best advice you were ever given.
Well, there's more than one thing, but the main thing was my dad taught me that you just never give up. Whatever it is you're going to do, you don't quit in the middle of it. And the best illustration of that, when I bought my first car, Dad said I could have a car as long as I paid for it myself, insured it myself, gassed it myself, and repaired it myself. Well, I was doing fine till we got to the repair part. And the transmission was bad on my first car. So I went to the junkyard and I bought a used transmission. And I started working on getting that transmission changed out. Got the old one out, could not get the new one in. And I worked and I worked and I worked week after week after week. And I wasn't going to quit, and I just kept at it. But finally I said, Dad, I know you said you weren't going to work on my car. But I said, and I'm not quitting, but I can't get this thing in here. He said, okay. So he crawls underneath. We had a thing where you could drive up on and change the oil that Dad had built. He got under there and he went, oh, okay. And I went, what did you just do? He said, well, the lesson you're learning right now is you have to line up the spine, the spleen, or whatever it is. There's a thing that goes into the motor in between the clutch and the transmission, which is manual.
Yeah.
It's called a spline. But it's got little teeth on it. And if you don't line it up with the motor, you can't get it in there.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I learned to not quit, because I had worked and worked and worked.
Yeah.
And I've had other instances like that in repair of cars.
Yeah.
But other things in life.
Man. It's good advice. Never give up, you know. Okay, so last question from Sarah is, who was the first person you brought to Christ?
Well, the first one that I remember right off was Mabel Beerley. And we had a revival at Mount Carmel Church. And she said she was ready to make her commitment to Christ and to be baptized. And we didn't have a baptistry at Mount Carmel Church, so we had quite a bit of work to do to get to a place where we could do baptizing.
Yeah.
So there was a man who had a pond where his animals drank their water and such on his land. He said, well, you can use mine. And it was night now. And so we parked a whole bunch of cars all around the pond and turned on the headlights so you could see. And so she got dressed in some older clothes, and I got some somewhere. And so we went out into the water. And it was real shallow, so we had to go out quite a ways. And so finally we got out to probably 20 feet or so into the water, and it was about up to my waist. And she was very nervous about the water. And I said, Mabel, don't ever be afraid, because I'm not going to let anything happen to you. You're going to come out of here safe. And so she said, well, I can't move my feet. And I thought, I can't move mine either. And see, it was real muddy in the bottom of this pond. Mm-hmm. And our feet had gotten stuck in the mud. I said, well, let's just do this, and then we'll worry about that. So I baptized her, and she says, I can't get my feet out of here. I said, well, just hold still. And I reached around and grabbed a hold of her waist. She was a tiny little thing, probably 5 foot, maybe 5'1", about 100 pounds or less. Man. And so I literally lifted her straight up out of the water. And I said, now you just go to the edge of the pond. And so she did. She went over and got a towel and this type of thing. And then I thought to myself, now I got to get out of here, because my feet were stuck. Yeah. And so I pulled my feet out. We both lost a pair of shoes.
Oh no!
Down in the pond, because they were lost down in the mud.
Wow.
So she was the first, and then her husband, I baptized him about 6 months later, and he requested I baptize him in a little creek down by his farm.
Yeah. And
it was I had to check it out, make sure there was no glass or anything, because it was right next to the road. What I don't know you would know is that they never forgot me. And I was at a convention, and he sat at the door to the display area for 2 hours to try to catch me, because he wanted to see me, before I left or he left the convention. And he told me that he had become a leader in the church, and that he had founded a camp. And so this is the first family that I influenced.
Wow. And that convention, how many years later was that?
That was probably 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man.
Now, that's that the third question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are Sarah's questions. Thanks for answering them. So let's jump back into your story. We were middle to end of your undergrad.
Okay.
Take me there.
Well, during that period of time, from 55, which was my freshman year, I had a constant pressure for lack of funds. And so there was a lady in my home church from time to time would send a check, which literally helped me. And then that Christmas, when I got laid off at Pogues, I guess it was.
What was Pogues?
Pogues was a May company.
It was what?
Like Macy's.
Oh, you had a job at a Macy's type company?
Yes, twice. Yeah.
What did you do there?
Packing and shipping and receiving and stocking, and I did the same thing at Shillito's. During the holidays, they would hire people from colleges to do then as soon as the holiday was over, they let you go.
Okay, so you did some seasonal stuff.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
You never told me about that.
Yeah.
What's Shellitoes? What is that?
That's another one. It's a Federated department store.
Pogues and Shellitoe? What is
Shillitoes.
it? Shellitoes.
Yeah, and Brenda Moore's was another one, and they were.
What are these names?
Well, Brenda Moore's was a sporting goods store.
Okay.
It would be like Dick's.
Wow.
And so I worked there also at one time. But anyway, it was really hard, and the finances were real hard.
Yeah.
And that's when I had numerous jobs. So one of the jobs that I applied for was they needed a shipping clerk at a company called Cincinnati Testing and Research Laboratories. And so I applied, and they hired me. And so I was working there part-time. And they made the nose cone for the Jupiter rocket. And so I had worked at Douglas, of course.
Yeah.
So that gave me a little bit of an in. And the funny part of that is they never told me anything about what I was doing. They give you a job and they don't tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm, whipping things back and forth. And the president of the company comes walking up and he says, "Are you new here?" And I said, "Yes." And he's the owner. You got to be careful. And he says, "Do you know what you've got in your hands?" And I said, "No, it just looks like a little piece of ceramic of some kind." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "That's $250,000 that you have in your hand." That's back then.
Wow.
So that would be close to $1 million today.
Yeah.
And he said, "If you chip one edge of that, it's worth nothing." Who taught you to pack this? I said, "Nobody." He said, "Well, listen very carefully to what I'm going to say. You handled it like it's gold."
Man.
And so you talk, and I'm looking at this thing, and it's just about this big around. And I said, "Well, what's it for?" He said, "When we put the cone on, there's a place where we put fuel in, and also another place where we connect the cone. And we freeze this thing to make it as small as we can. It's machined to fit." He said, "We put it in, and as soon as it thaws, it's as if it's been welded."
Wow.
So I worked there, and they lost my birth certificate. But
They lost your birth certificate?
yeah, I had to have it when I went to work there, and they lost it.
Wow.
Well, anyway, that's this. Did I tell the story about getting hired at the bank?
I don't think you have.
Okay, well, things really got hard, and you could not find work. And I mean, I was down to about 50 cents. And I don't beg and I don't borrow.
Yeah.
So those are two things I didn't do. And I went to my mailbox, and there was an envelope in there and said, "From a friend." And I opened it up and it had a $5 bill in it. That was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's to this day who gave it to me.
Really?
Yeah, it was either my roommate or somebody who heard I was having a hard time.
Man.
And I always checked the mail because Mrs. Rankin, she was the one who would send me the checks every once in a while.
Yeah.
Might have sent me a check.
And she was from your church at home?
Yeah, and she was a retired school teacher.
Wow.
So anyway, no letter from Mrs. Rankin, but there was this other one for $5. So I said, okay. So that was used up. Now I'm down to the 50 cents. And it costs $0.25 to go into town, and a quarter to come back. And I remembered that my cousin, Ralph, not Ralph, my cousin Eddie, who had gotten me the job at Douglas, said that there was a service bureau in Cincinnati that might hire me because of my experience working in data processing.
Service bureau, what is that?
Well, what they did is they took in business, and then they would run it through there. It was sort of like an off-base company that would do the computer work for your company.
Huh, okay.
So that's what they called a service bureau back then. So I go into the service bureau, and there's a woman running this thing, and I'm going, uh-oh. Because back in that day, there was not a lot of friendliness between men and women in work.
Yeah.
Unless you knew them. So I came in and I said, I had worked at Douglas and I knew how to run all this equipment. And she said, well, show me. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Because in those days, it wasn't just sit down to a computer. She said, well, let's see you set up the printer. And she handed me a schedule to follow, which was totally different than anything I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't understand how you got this all laid out. But I said, you tell me what you want done and I can do it. She said, I knew you couldn't do it. I got mad. Because, I was at my end of my rope, And she said, don't take up any more of my time. And I thought, okay. So I was angry. And I started out, and there was an old rickety elevator, and I had to wait for it to come up. And she says, I forgot. I thought, what? I don't want know anything you forgot. And she said, the guy over at the bank said he was going to look for a part-time guy. Maybe you ought to check him out. And I said, well, which bank? She said, First National Bank of Cincinnati, down on 4th Street. I said, over my dead body, I'm not going anywhere else. I'm going to go home. I was used up.
Yeah.
But I followed my premise, never to give up. So I went down, cooled off, said, what have I got to lose? So I went over to the bank, and I was not dressed the best. Our clothes back in those days, we kind of scroungy,
Yeah.
I had a real scroungy coat, and I thought, I'll just get this over with and go back to school. So I come in, and the person who interviewed me to begin with said, well, just sit here. He'll be done in a couple of minutes with his analyst. And back in that day, you had an analyst that worked with all your computers, that set up all the wiring. But anyway, so I sat there and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to stay here. I've already been through some stuff. I don't want to go through again.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty pumped. And the guy finally, it was a kind of heavy-set guy. He comes out of the office and goes about the machinery they have there. And I'm looking at it, and there's a 126 computer and all the upgraded Remington Rand equipment.
Yeah.
And I can run all of it. And so...
and this is from your prior experience at Douglas?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They had all that stuff there?
Yes,
they
did.
Using it?
Yes.
What? Okay.
Let's say, so he motioned me to come in. I came in. I said... the gal down at the service bureau had said that you were possibly looking for someone part-time. I can't work full-time. I used to work at Douglas Aircraft, and I ran all this equipment when I was there, and I can run all of it. And I didn't say any more. And he sat there and looked at me, and he didn't say anything. And I'm going, what's going on here? And he said, did you see the gentleman that just stepped out of here? And I said, yeah. He said, do you know what we were talking about? I said, no. He said, we just brought that 126 in here. Nobody knows how to run it. He said, that's number one. And we were discussing the fact that we can't afford to hire anybody full time. And so we're looking for a part-time person. And he said, I can't believe you walked in here.
Wow.
Can you start tomorrow?
That's amazing.
And that's how I got the job.
Wow. And so how long did you work at the bank?
I worked there for a full year. And then I went back to Douglas for the summer.
Yeah.
Came back, and I had not thought it through. And when I came back to work at the bank, he said, no, I can't hire you because you left. So that's how I got into these other jobs.
Oh, wow.
I went to Billboard, and I run their equipment.
Yeah. You haven't told me about Billboard yet. When was that?
That was after I couldn't get the job back at the bank.
Well, this is right after.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the same Billboard that's Billboard today.
Yes, it was, and I did the top 10 songs of the week, and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Take me before we get into Billboard. Take me through your standard day at the bank.
Oh.
With the machines and
Okay.
Yeah. What'd your average day look like?
Well, the first thing is it's punch cards.
Okay.
They did have
same punch cards right here.
Yes.
So these ones. These again.
Those are from the bank.
This is from the First National Bank of Cincinnati.
It's written on it.
What? Let's find it. First National. Oh yeah. Right there at the top. Gotta get it to focus. First National Bank of Cincinnati there at the top.
Yeah.
And then the machine.
You started out with a key punch operator.
A Remington Rand.
Yeah.
At the top. And what is that? It says Remington Rand and the P something. Is that the model?
Well, the thing is that the difference between IBM and Remington Rand.
Yeah.
IBM had rectangular holes.
Okay.
And IBM had rectangular holes, and Remington Rand had circular holes. And actually, Remington Rand, as far as I know, preceded IBM.
Wow.
So, but IBM ran about a business. Because they started out as a typewriter company.
So what are the different colors here mean?
Well, one of them has to do with the master. One has to do with the name of the individual that you have. Another one has to do with payment that came in.
Yeah.
So each one of them has a different significance.
So here's all the colors. And I see the master here's the pink one.
No, it's actually the white one.
Oh. That's the white one. Okay. These are really interesting.
And the master being, it carries the balance.
Wow.
Okay, the rest of it has to do with information concerning the individual.
Wow.
So anyway,
how'd you get these?
Oh, I just came home with some in my pocket. I've got a stack like this in the garage. I just kept it. Well, what we did, many times we had to reproduce something jammed or whatever. We have to copy it.
You just get one real quick.
Yeah,
I
right.
see.
Yeah, and so to do the job, okay, you begin with the payment that came in. You get a stack of payments, and it is set up with a hole that the computer is going to put in to the old master, So what you do is you sort them so you get all the payments in sequence, like you would on a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing something sequential, you would say, well, I got to have these in so that they'll match up the old master.
Yeah.
Then after you've sorted it, you go over to a collator. And the collator is you put the new payments in one part of it and you put the old payment card in another part of it, and it puts the cards together.
Mm.
So you have, they read. It reads the cards, so you don't just put one anywhere. It goes where it belongs.
Yeah.
Okay, after you go through the collator, then you take the stack, which you've got a double stack now, and you go over to the 126 computer. You put it into the computer, and then you wire it. By the way, these have to be wired. So you wire it concerning what you're doing. And for example, in this particular case, you're putting a zero punch in the old master, so that after you've made a new master, you can separate them again and take the old master out and the new master in.
I see.
Then after you've done that, now you've been through the collator and you've been through the sorter, and I was able to carry a stack of cards just like this and turn them and not drop them.
Wow.
And I was proud of that I could do that. Not many people could do that.
Yeah.
And they would do it by hand like this. But anyway, then you go to the printer. Now the printer, it was about 3.5 or 4 feet high. It was about 3 feet to 3.5 feet wide. It's all mechanical, and it would read and then print. And so it had like a typewriter inside of it. So then you've separated out the old masters, you have the new master, and you run a report.
Mm.
Then after you've run the report, you set it down next to what the balance is supposed to be of all the payments.
I see.
There's another way that they keep track of their payments. And if you're out 10 cents, you find it.
Wow.
And so we would sometimes be there at 9 o'clock at night trying to find a dime. And after that, and now that printing is done, that report goes into paying and receiving on the next Monday morning.
Wow.
And it was very intensive, very physically intensive. We did have a thing that was just beginning when I left, which was a tape. It was kind of had little holes in it, and I don't know if it like a teletype. And it came over the phone line, and you would run it, and it would make cards. And it was from branches and stuff.
Wow.
So that was really
Man.
looked upon as advanced.
Yeah. So this was sort of tracking when the bank gave out loans and people were paying back the loans and stuff like that. So did the old MasterCards, did you guys keep all of them?
For a while, we did, and then we would destroy them.
You'd phase them out after a certain amount of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if there was an error, you have to go back.
So what happened when you had an error that was...
You just went back and you kept looking at what was given, and the computer never made a mistake.
Man.
The problem was the human element, the key punch operator.
Right.
You're going, where did she get her info? And she put a 0 where a 1 belongs.
Yeah.
And we're off a dime, and we found it.
How did most people pay? Did they come in and boom?
No, a little bit of both. Some paid, came in. Others sent it in by mail.
Man, okay. They just sent a check and then
Yeah.
you guys just got it done, huh?
So that's what I did.
Interesting.
And there were certain days that were very intense where you did a lot more work than you did other days.
Yeah.
And I had my Mondays. I often worked till 9 o'clock. Even though I didn't have classes on Mondays, so I worked till about 9 o'clock on every Monday that they needed what we call a long day. And then during the week, I could only come in at after classes.
So you did about 20 hours a week?
More closer to 30.
Almost a full-time job.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And especially in the summer when people were on vacation. But that was my computer days.
Yeah, wow.
And they eventually would like to have me go into new training with NCR.
Was that that same year?
No, that would have been. I was still working there in '62.
So you left for the summer, worked at Douglas.
Yeah.
And then came back, and they're like, we can't hire you.
Yeah.
But then you got hired again?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
So what I did was I was having a terrible time because there was no jobs,
Oh, wow.
in my field at all. So I went back with, embarrassed. And I said, I really do need this job. He said, okay, we'll hire you back. But you got to promise me now. You're not going to go away on the summer. I said, you got my promise. I will stay. And so I never went home during the summer.
Wow.
And if I did, it was like a week or so. And so I worked there right up until it was time to quit my church in Kentucky and then to start the new church in Fairfield, which we met at George Washington Junior High School, and was there 7.5 years getting the church established.
Wow.
And that was the year Betty and I got married on June 7th, 1963.
Wow.
The church started on February 3rd, 1963.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you got a little ahead of yourself, so let's bring it back to end of your undergrad.
Oh, end of undergrad. Okay. So I had gone from total poverty to making good money.
Yeah.
One of my jobs was to take care of a whole floor of the dormitory. I had to inspect it, and I had to oversee the kids, and it was called an RA, resident assistant. And Tom Frisley had a lot to do with that. He said, well, I want you to take over that. I said, I don't know if I can do another thing. He said, oh, yeah, you can do that. That's not hard. But I got free rent.
Yeah.
So I had free rent for taking care of a floor. I said the second thing I did was I had the bank, and I was making pretty good money for those days. And I had the church every weekend. So I made $35 a week at the church. So I actually had 3 jobs. And I took 15 to 16 hours of classes.
And
Yeah, so anyway, I worked through the requirements for my bachelor's degree, and I was able to finish in 4 years. And so in 1959, I graduated with my Bachelor of Arts Bible.
okay.
And but I didn't leave the school. I decided I needed graduate work, so I set up classes for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
There was a degree program for an additional year, which was called a Bachelor of Theology. And I said, well, if I'm going to go on and get a master's, I might as well get that one too while I'm doing it. So I did everything at a graduate level for that degree, which was not required, and I got a Bachelor of Theology degree the next year. Then after that, that would have been 60. And then after that, I had 3 years to go to take all the rest of the classes. Actually, I should have been able to do it in 2, but I was worn out. And so I took the all the graduate classes that I could. Besides, this might be of interest. One of the classes that I continued to take was concert choir, which was an honor choir, and so I was the tenor soloist for the choir.
Wow!
And I got credit for taking the class.
Oh, cool!
And I have the record of having been in the choir longer than anyone in that choir.
Oh, wow!
It's all changed now, but back then I had 6 years in the choir. So anyway, I was plugging along, taking classes, and I was one of the things you did as a graduate student, you were expected to do team teaching at times. That is, that the professor would have you give you an assignment, and then you would get up and you would communicate to the class. And that was for graduate credit. And so I was taking a class in abnormal psych, and I happened to look out over the crowd and saw somebody I didn't know. And I said, I wonder who that is, because I knew everybody in school. And this would have been 1961, 62. And so we have a break. It was a 3-hour class at night. And so we had a break, and I came down to get a drink at the drinking fountain, and your grandmother was there getting a drink. And I couldn't figure out who she was. So she was, sweet and quiet. And I asked her, I said, are you new in school or what? And she said, no, I'm just taking music, and I thought I'd take a class. I just graduated from nurses training at Christ Hospital. And I said, well, what's your name? And she said, Betty Ammons. And I said, well, are you any relation to Charlie Ammons? Oh, she said, yeah, he's my brother. Oh, okay. And that was the end of the conversation. And I talked with Charlie afterwards, and I said, I'd like to ask her out. And the rest is history.
Wow. So you guys dated for like 2 years, and then...
No, it was more like 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it wasn't a long time.
Oh, wow. And you asked her to marry you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was up in years. See, I was getting old.
Oh.
I was 25.
I'm 25.
I know. But I think I was 25 going on 26.
Okay.
And
I got to get to stepping.
Yeah.
What?
And the thought was, this is what you do when you get into your upper 20s. You say, if I'm going to settle down, this is it. To not speak out of school, I had been in a couple serious relationships that I probably could have married either one, but it didn't work out.
Oh, Grandpa, you are a catch.
Yeah, right. But
well, I'm glad you married Grandma.
Yeah.
You made the right choice, Grandpa.
Yeah, well, this is now, as of next Saturday, 56 years.
56 years. That's right. 63, you said?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And so after what happened was I was working at the bank and, happy as can be. And something else was happening behind the scenes. And that is that they had a guy lined up to start the church in Fairfield. And at the last minute, he said, no, I don't want to do it.
This is Fairfield, Ohio, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they were desperate. We've told everybody we're going to start this church in January or February of '63, and we don't have anybody to be the preacher.
So why did he get cold feet?
He went somewhere else.
Man, that's messed up.
Starting a new church is no picnic. For one thing, you don't get paid very much.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so Lester, he said he'd watched one. He's in the second one.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, continue.
And let's see, we left off where?
You were just talking about how the pastor got cold, cold feet at the new place. Go ahead.
And so what happened was Lester LeMay, who was the fairly new preacher at New Burlington, was on the search committee. And I'm the one that got him to come to school from First Christian Church in Inglewood, because he had already graduated, and this would be graduate school he was coming for. And he put my name in the pot. And somewhere I'll try to find it. I have a copy of what he wrote up about me when we did this. But anyway, so they said, well, let's interview him. So the committee called me, would you have lunch with us? I said, well, what is this about? Well, we're starting a new church, and we understand that you were kind of looking around, and you're closing out your schooling. We want to see if maybe you'd be interested. And I was thinking, it's about time I leave the one in Kentucky, and I had actually checked with one of the northern Cincinnati churches.
Yeah.
So anyway, they interviewed me, and I said, well, now I'm still taking classes. They won't be done until the middle of spring. Then I'll be through with the classwork. And they said, that's not a problem. I said, okay. And I said, well, then what, I hate to ask, but what do you pay? And he said, well, we'll pay you part-time until you are able to work full-time. And he kind of mumbled about what it was going to be. And it was like, what's 15 minus out of 65? 50.
50?
Yeah. It was $50 a week.
$50 a week?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought about it, and I said, this must be the Lord doing this. So I said, okay. So what I did was I quit my job at the bank. And
how much were you making a week at the bank?
About $1.45, $1.50.
A week?
An hour.
An hour. So how much a week do you think?
Well, 30 hours times $1.50.
So you're making like $45 a week?
Yeah, plus the housing, and I may have been making more than that. It may be $1.80 an hour.
Okay.
But it was substantially more. And your grandma was, at the time, she was in between jobs. But when we got together, she took a job at the Visiting Nurse Association. And so she was having a good income, about double mine. Well, anyway, so the next thing we did was set up the time for the church service at the junior high school. And there was a good nucleus that was coming from North 7th Street Church of Christ. And now they had a preacher, So they introduced me and said I was a recent graduate from Cincinnati, which made everybody happy. If you graduate from Cincinnati and you're in Cincinnati, that's a good thing.
They like you.
Yeah, yeah. And so anyway, that's pretty much the history of it. I hit the ground running, getting to know the people, calling on the sick.
Yeah.
Probably pretty green around the ears when it came to knowing what I was doing in a full-time church.
Yeah.
But just for your information, one of the elders talked to me at the 30th reunion. He said, I just wanted you to know you were the best we ever had.
Wow.
And that's the same 56 years.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah. He's dead, gone now, but...
You're so morbid with those things, Grandpa. He's
Well,
dead now.
Well, he is. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Okay, so then we're working hard.
okay.
We relocate into Fairfield. And the first setback was they decided to give me, when I went full time, which was sometime in March, and they had promised me a living wage.
Yeah.
Well, never do anything that's not in writing.
Oh, man.
So they gave me, all of a sudden, I got a $15 raise before I knew it. And so I said, well, that's not going to be adequate because Betty was pregnant now and your mom was on the way.
Yeah.
So here we are, and I'm thinking $65 a week, and it's going to be really tight.
Yeah.
So we had rented a house from a former member of the North 7th Street Church who had moved away. And I sat down with the numbers and I said, well, I can't make that rent. There's no way I can pay the rent on $65 a week and survive.
Yeah.
So I did something that probably nobody has ever done. I took an ad out in the newspaper. And I said, preacher looking for a house can pay only, and I don't remember the amount, but I think I was paying $95, and I said, can only pay $65 a month. And I figured that's got to come with this. I get a phone call. And a guy from Lancaster, not Lancaster, a Baptist church in Cincinnati. He was a leader there. He said, I have an old farmhouse here. I'll rent to you for $65.
Wow.
So we moved. They moved, and that house still stands, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, it's 100-some years old.
Whoa.
He's dead, gone also.
Grandpa, morbid.
Yeah.
You gotta work on these things.
Anyway, he's a sweet guy. And there's a lot of history about that house that I can tell you later on. But so we moved. We moved to that house. And so I met with the board that was the Cincinnati Evangelizing Fellowship. And I said, well, I was promised a living wage. And they said, well, we'll get back to you. So I thought, no, that doesn't sound good. And living wage would have been $125 a week, something like that back then.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear from him. And then a week went by, and then finally they called me. They said, well, we need to meet. I said, I met. Okay. And they said, well, they gave you a $15 raise. I said, yeah, but you're promised a living wage. That's not a living wage. He said, I'm sorry, we can't give you against their will.
Huh.
And I thought, you turkeys. Here you are, you 5 preachers, and you didn't stand up for me?
Man.
And you have to understand the mentality back in those days. People believed that their job was to keep the preacher poor, because there was a lot of guys out there in it for the money. And so there was a real backlash.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, we had one preacher who had a Chevrolet car, and he was at North 7th Street, and he got a real good buy on a Pontiac. So he traded in on a Pontiac. They had a board meeting and said, nobody in our church going to have a preacher that drives a Pontiac.
Wow. Was there a lot of like scandals going on at the time? Or?
No. It just.
So why did they want to keep you poor?
I just don't know. I had my home preacher. He got a real good buy on a Cadillac. Oh, they had a meeting and said, no preacher of ours is going to drive around a Cadillac.
Wow.
So there was a mentality in the 50s.
Yeah.
That was very distorted.
So what did they do? They make them return the cars?
One of them, my home preacher, yeah.
Man.
But I think that the one from North 7th Street, he was a fighter. And he said, I'm keeping this. Sorry about that. But anyway, so I was very, 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 very busy. Going through this period of time, your grandmother was, getting she got pregnant. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to have a baby. And we'd made a commitment when we got married. I said, we have children, you're not working anymore. And if I have to, I'll take a second job. But I said, you need to be with the baby. You need to be with the family.
Yeah.
And so we're getting closer and closer. Still meeting in the junior high. And the day that your mother was born, we were I was at the hospital with her. And this pediatrician came in, and your mother won't like to hear this, but her nose was a little bit like this. And he said, we said, well, what about that? Oh, I'm sorry. He said, that's the way it's going to be. I said, you mean she's going to have a crooked nose?
Oh,
he said,
no.
yeah, I'm sorry. And left. And your grandma was tearing up, and I said, oh, we got to get to the bottom. And I'm really ticked as well.
Oh, man.
And then the obstetrician comes in, and he said, what's the matter? And I said, well, the pediatrician was in, and he said, your mom's there holding your mother. And he told us that our baby's deformed and that the nose is off to one side. And he said, what? He said, well, that's what he said. He said, don't you know anything? Don't they know anything? When a baby is born, especially the first, the whole face is distorted. It all comes back.
Really?
Your baby will be absolutely fine.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the sad thing is, I didn't get that till the next day. I was preaching on Sunday morning and a nervous wreck. I come in and I'll never forget, Agnes Herzog decided she was going to take over the music without me knowing.
Oh.
And she did, and I climbed her like I was so angry. I just vented my anger on her. And she was in tears. And I thought, well, now they're going to fire me because I lost my temper.
Oh, man.
And I later went to her and said, we just gotten some news, and Agnes, you got the brunt of it, and I'm sorry. I should not have said what I did.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever forgave me, but that's how things are.
Wow.
So that's how.
Way to go, Grandpa.
Yeah. So that's how the years went, and people still say that my big mistake was leaving that church
Man.
because it had all the potential. It's gone up to about 500 on a Sunday, but it would have been the size of Central if I'd have stayed.
Whoa. Still standing today, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, they've had good preachers, and they've just built another building, and this will be the third. I built one, and then they built a gym, and they built a bigger auditorium, then a gym, then a bigger auditorium. So they got a lot of investment, millions now.
Wow.
But the church has not done what it could do. But I think it's done well.
That's good.
Yeah, it got good leadership and very, very strong commitment to the Bible and teaching and working with youth and all that today. I'm still on their mailing list.
Oh, cool. Still got her stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's the history up to 1963.
1963. Okay. I think that's a good place to stop.
Okay.
Thanks, Grandpa.
You're welcome. Thank you.